notes here on my phone. I also think very interesting. So it's an important and interesting subject, and also very central to Jewish life. And that is the Shema. Now, when I say the word Shema, everyone's like, okay, I know what you're talking about. I've been there. I've done it before. I'm Jewish. I've known this sentence and this paragraph for years. And you know what? I think before I did research on this subject, I would be like everyone else, you know. The Shema, everyone knows the Shema. Everyone knows what it means, basically, and everyone kind of has an understanding about what we're talking about. But when I did research, I found so many fascinating, like, global insights. Global is in the Jewish worldview from the Shema that to me it was just fascinating. Because we look at the Shema as being sort of like a declaration or a pledge of allegiance for what we mean, what we mean when we say Jewish. What do we believe in? What do we espouse? What do we hold the most dear? And what is the tenets? What's the Jewish doctrine? What's that all about? You know, what's our contribution to the world? What's our mission statement to the world? That is all detailed in the Shema. So, in a way, like if you wanted to have a highly concentrated synthesis of Jewish philosophy,
here's what.
like if you wanted to have, let's say, the one pill, you know, like they have today, you want to just put everything. Give me all my nutritions in one. I want to go on the diet, the lemon diet. What are they called? What's that called? The cleanse, right? All I want everything concentrated into one little lemonade drink, right? If you wanted that for Judaism, you would go to the Shema. And we know it's so central to Jewish life. It's so part of the mystique of Judaism that it's the first thing we teach our kids, and it's the thing that we traditionally say before we die. You know, it's not fun to talk about, but we're all going to die here. Not here, I'm saying. All of us sitting here.
Resale value.
You mentioned the formaldehyde. Who knows, right? But all of us, that's the human condition. It's the, life is this disease that we all end up dying from. It's depressing. But in Judaism, every little bit of life and the process and, you know, the ups and downs of the cycles of life is touched upon by Jewish meaning, by purpose, by prayer, by liturgy, by philosophy. And if you go to the book, book of Jewish liturgy, you'll find what do you say when you're about to die. And I know my grandfather was a very influential rabbi in Israel, and he had a student who was privy to a horrible car accident. And he was just standing there, and he just sees this accident, and he's sure everyone's dying. If they're not dead, they're dying. And he was just frozen in place. So my grandfather went up, asked him. He was obviously shooken up by this episode. He came to talk to my grandfather. I asked him, well, did you go and say vidui with the people that were dying? So what's vidui? Vidui means the confession. It's confession that we say on Yom Kippur, but it's also, there's a special prayer that we say right before you're about to die. And my grandfather, in his worldview, when you see someone tragically, obviously he's dying in front of you, you got to make sure that you infuse this with vitality, with spiritual vitality, by saying the vidui. So to me, like, and he's like, the guy's like, whoa, I don't have a book with me, a book of Jewish liturgy. Like, who knows the vidui here by? I don't even know the vidui you're supposed to say before you die by heart. Anybody knows? You know, so how can you tell me, you know, Rabbi Wolbe Sr., how can you tell me that I have to go over to someone who's about to die and say the vidui with him? I don't know who knows it by heart? Nobody knows it by heart. You know, we all bad Jews.
Google it.
So he says, like, you know it by heart? Learn it by heart.
What if you say it prematurely?
Not the end of the world.
You put one reserve in these? No. Isn't that kind of...
No, it's a prayer. Good to see you, Aharon. It's a prayer, and it's a good thing, as we know. This is the season of the high holidays, so we're about to approach the high. Rosh Hashanah in a couple of weeks, and we look. If you guys want to examine the liturgy, the prayer, the philosophy, the themes of Rosh Hashanah, you'll see a lot about this discussion of life and death. And to answer your question, who will live and who will die? Right? That's one of the high points of the prayers. Who's going to live and who's going to die, and how they're going to die, and all the details and gory details, right? Right? And we do that, and the question is, that's not inspiring, is it? It's not, but actually it kind of is. Because if you actually are thinking about your own demise, you'll live your life in a different way. The realization of the fact that we're not here forever makes us want to make the most out of our time here. So yes, it's not exciting to think about it, but it actually is very inspiring. So this great tragedy that was averted by someone not dying and saying the prayer of the vidui for naught. Well, that's actually not so bad, not the end of the world, because, okay, you didn't die, that's not so bad. Wow, there's another great, I'm getting so off topic here. There's a great episode about this really, really religious guy. Very religious. And we know when you say a blessing, you say a blessing on the water, right? You make a bracha, and then you have to drink it right away. That's the law. You have to drink it right away. That's why if anyone... Well, especially when there's a bracha. It's linked, you want to do the bracha right before the hamotzi. Has anyone here ever seen someone cut a little bit of the hamotzi before they make the blessing? Has anyone ever seen that?
No. Before they make it?
Have you seen it? Okay, there's this ubiquitous custom where you're about to make the hamotzi Friday night or Saturday or any time really. You take the knife, you cut a little bit before you make the bracha, before you make the blessing. Well, why would you do that? It's like you're defiling the bread before you even begin.
Because isn't the hamotzi you leave a part off?
Well, not only that, you haven't made the hamotzi yet. You're about to make the hamotzi. Before you make the hamotzi, you start cutting as you start cutting before.
You're not talking about
right. So you have the breads. You take the knife. You give a little. You cut a little bit, and then you make the hamotzi. The reason why is because in Jewish law, you want to expedite the blessing to the actualization of what the blessing is trying to bring about. Thus, if the blessing is a blessing, let's go make hamotzi, eat bread. You want to make the blessing, and you eat the bread right away. And therefore, how do you make it faster? Well, you start the cutting already earlier. As if thank God they don't do that for circumcisions. Oh, bad. Thank God. But either way, we have to expunge that from the public record. Either way, so that's this. So there was this really religious guy, and he was walking. This is not a true story, by the way. He was walking through a Damascus gate towards the Kotel, right? And we know Damascus gate, not the safest way to go. Maybe you should go through Jaffa Gate. There's other ways to go. It's full of Arabs. Anyhow, he's walking in the middle of the night by himself. Arabs that are hostile to Jews who look really Jewish.
I wasn't allowed to go through that gate.
No, you can't. It's very dangerous.
I'll let you go through my gate. What are you talking about?
It's very dangerous.
Well, there's 7 gates.
Yeah, well, but that is a very, very dangerous place to go. I'm not trying to be, bigoted. It's a good idea to avoid. This guy says I'm going anyhow. So this Arab guy comes and pulls a knife on him. So he says, "Stop!" And he says to the Arab guy, he says, "Wait 1 second." And he starts saying out loud the vidui. And he says, and he finishes it. The Arab gets so flustered with what he starts running away. He's like, no. Like, that's the joke. That's the joke. He's like, "Why are you waiting? I made the blessing." Okay, that's the joke. No, like you're supposed to say no, because you can't make an interruption between. Anyhow, it's not a true story. But either way, the Shema is at the center of kind of Jewish life. It's the first thing we say in the morning. It's the last thing we say at night. First thing we teach a child. Last thing we say as we exit the world. Why? Because it is what we are. It is the declaration of Judaism. It's what we believe in. It's what makes us special. It's what we are contributing to the world. I told a great story that I'll repeat. And I hope everyone who heard it. Were you there 2 weeks ago?
Which one?
By Israel's house.
I think it's just me and Miriam.
So, Alexi, okay, so I'll tell the story over again.
We won't spoil your punchline.
What was the punchline?
What was the story?
So, in 2006, there was a war in Lebanon. Good to see Dennis. So there was a war in southern Lebanon between Israel and Hezbollah. Hezbollah is this organization that is hell-bent on the destruction of Israel, and they kidnapped a bunch of soldiers, and then they sent rockets into Israel, and they began a 34-day war in July of 2006. And there was this one episode that kind of galvanized the nation. I said if you've heard the story before, it's because I said it 2 weeks ago. So there's this commander, the soldier. He was a reserve soldier. He was an American family. His name was Klein, Roe Klein, and he was leading a bunch of soldiers into this, very hotly contested battle site. And they were like in a narrow alleyway with walls on both sides. And then suddenly, out of the blue, there's this, from the other side, a live grenade comes, and it's right there. And this guy, Roe Klein, 31-year-old father of two, I think, he jumps on the grenade and screams on top of his lungs, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and it explodes, and he saves his guys. That was the story. And this episode, obviously, in time of war, it's always a time of unity. And in Israel, it's a bunch of Jews, two Jews, three opinions. Imagine 6 million Jews, That's what it's like. And it's unfortunate, but it's the reality. That's the way it is. And, they find a way to make it work. But in times of war, all that is suspended. There's an incredible amount of unity, and everyone's trying to contribute, and it's a very, very positive, atmosphere with regards to the nation coming together. This one story was such a pivotal, such an amazing, just episode that just woke everyone up. It was like this remarkable wake-up call that the nation had. This young, really put together, handsome, kind of picture perfect guy, and what he did for his soldiers, and then how he kind of went down in the flames of martyrdom by screaming on top of his lunch, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Echad. You can watch videos, by the way, on YouTube, like I did this. You can watch videos of his soldiers were interviewed afterwards, and they're talking about this episode. Pretty remarkable. Either way, so the story, the postscript to this story is that a friend of mine, actually, I said last time it was a friend of mine, it was actually one of my brothers. He was so taken by the story that he said, okay, we're going to make a lasting monument for this story. So he said, we're going to go, and we're going to find a mountain on the outskirts of Jerusalem, and we're going to paint the biggest sign Jerusalem has ever seen of Shema Yisrael. And it was in the middle of the night. It was 2:30 in the morning. 2 days after this episode happened. So I doodled it, by the way. It was July 26th, 2006. So a little more than 9 years ago. By the way, this Roe Klein was awarded the highest honor. The Medal of Valor?
Second highest.
What's the highest?
The Gvura is the highest. You got the Mofet.
And what did he do? What did he get?
Mofet.
Okay, so...
Still pretty high and rare.
Well, the article that I saw said it was the highest. I guess there's something even higher.
Yeah.
But apparently it said this was not awarded in 40 years. This is a really big deal. And so we drove to a mountain on the outskirts of Jerusalem called Har HaMenuchot, which is the place where they bury. It's Israel's biggest grave site. It's an entire mountain full of graves. And so if you look at the mountain, it's like a white mountain because there's no trees. The neuter of all the trees and all the Jerusalem stone, all the gravestones are all white. So it looks like at a place, like just a white mountain full of probably at least 1 million graves. Either way, we drove in the middle of the night. We took buckets and buckets of paint and ladders and whatnot, paintbrushes. And by the way, this when I was 19. Don't judge me, okay?
Which brother was this?
None of that you know. And we found this great spot. There was this, I think it was like the sign for us, because the entire facade of the mountain has this really nice stone. It's like kind of this stone, you see that little stone pattern on top of the fireplace? Like that in the Jerusalem. And then there's this one empty concrete. Because it's, tiered, the mountain's tiered. So there's a bunch of graves, and there's another tier, and then it's all concrete inside. And we find this massive, empty block of concrete, and on the bottom there's this metal awning on top of a bunch of graves. Very bizarre because there's no metal anywhere in the entire mountain, and there's this metal overhang on a bunch of graves. We climb on top of that, and then we make these massive letters, Shema Yisrael. It's only, I guess, 8 letters, but we made like 12-foot letters. And it's on the outskirts of Jerusalem, but if you're driving into Jerusalem, you see this mountain because Jerusalem is surrounded by mountains. And every day there's hundreds of thousands of people, motorists, driving into Jerusalem. This is the main entrance to Jerusalem. And we built this massive sign, Shema Yisrael. I don't know why we did it. Is actually, in retrospect, is an act of vandalism, I guess. I guess at that time it made a lot of sense. But either way, it was,
Still there?
So unfortunately, it was up for years. And every time I would go in and out of Jerusalem, you just see it like this. It's right in front of you, even though it's miles and miles away, because it's so enormous.
Like Hollywood, right?
Yeah, like the Hollywood sign, Jerusalem equivalent. And it was there, and we kind of did it. I guess it was a monument to this soldier and to the the atmosphere that he engendered. But it's the rallying cry of the Jewish people, and
What was the public opinion of that over there?
Oh, I don't know. We did it overnight. That there was a guard at the entrance of the facility, and he's like, "Why do you have a ladder?" So we said, "Oh, we just finished doing some construction work in our house. It's 2:30 in the morning."
So you lie and you vandalize.
Something like that, yeah. Please don't judge me. We might have done work beforehand just to create this opportunity for a fair cover-up. Either way, so several years later...
And run into a cop.
No. So several years later, I was once going into Jerusalem and I saw that someone had taken, we did it with white paint, someone had taken white paint and just covered the entire site, it was hundreds of square feet of space. I don't know, I guess someone was so disturbed by it that they figured it's better to have nothing there, just like a white blob.
Doing glue over it.
Yeah, well, maybe. Should go back there. It was pretty crazy because I remember, like, the last letter, because I was the tallest guy there, and the last letter, so if you're painting over, I don't know, you have to kind of estimate how much room you need, right? You're doing 8 letters, but you don't. We should have done probably the first and then the last, and then work towards the middle.
The lamed is the tallest.
Right, so the lamed was the last letter, and we started from the first letter. So the shin was a little big,
But it's not as
and
tall.
then it's not as tall, but the lamed was really all the way at the edge of this metal, because the metal is like 8 feet in the air, and there's a 6 foot ladder on top of it, and then there's me fully stretched out all the way at the edge, and trying to remake that lamed. Crazy.
Dedication.
Yeah, so it was pretty crazy.
Something
I
you
could
allow
have
your
fall.
kids to
You fall down. And there's rocks there. It's the graves. Either way, that's the story.
Burial home.
Yeah, you don't need everybody. But that's Shema Yisrael. Shema Yisrael is, the heart and soul of the Jewish people. There's another great story, kind of illustrate this point. After 1945, so the war is over. Jews are liberated from all the camps. In the aftermath of the war, like in a few days afterwards, many hundreds of thousands, I don't know, many hundreds, but at least tens of thousands of Jews even died after liberation. I know my wife's grandmother just passed away a couple months ago. She had a sister that survived the whole war. She survived Berger Belsen. She did it. And then 3 days after they were liberated, she died. She died of tuberculosis, which was insane. It's like such a tragedy. You don't even know what to say. But either way, there was also a reality where there were a lot of Jewish children that were given to monasteries. And the parents, it's a decision that you hope to never make. You have a small child, and you have the option of maybe giving them over to someone then maybe they'll survive. Obviously, with the hopes that they'll survive. But then you're going into who knows what's going to happen? Who knows what they'll remember? Either way, so there was this one rabbi from Cincinnati, Rabbi Silver, who undertook this mission to try to go all across Europe to try to collect as many of these Jewish kids as he can. And you can read about it. There's a lot of books written about it. Very interesting. He was actually some officer or sergeant in the army, so he brought with him a bunch of big Marines guys. So that's how you gained admission to all these places. But he walks into all these places and they tell him, "Oh, no Jewish kids here. Oh, maybe there were, but who knows? They got all mixed up. There's a bunch of orphans. We don't know who's who. They were so young. It was years and years and years ago." So he would say, "Okay, I want to come back during the time where all the kids are going to sleep." And he comes back at 7:30. All the kids are in their beds, and he walks up and down screaming Shema Yisrael. And then all the kids who suddenly wake up and start calling for their mommies and covering their eyes, those are the Jewish kids, and he takes them. Now, that's the famous. I don't know how many kids he actually extracted, but that's kind of also indicative of what this actually means for our nation. It's the kind of the one thing that we never lose. It's the thing that's instilled within us, or the motto that's instilled within us from such a young age, and we kind of take it with us, and we associate it with our parents and with our heritage and with this ongoing tradition that hasn't been broken. The words Shema Yisrael, where do they come from? Anyone knows where they come from? Where do they come from? Who made them up?
When did you start this prayer?
Oh, that's a good question. Where do the words come from? Huh?
Deuteronomy 6.
That's right. It comes from Deuteronomy. This is really, really old. This is as old as the Jewish people themselves. The three paragraphs of the Shema, starting obviously with the famous sentence of Shema Yisrael, the 6 words of Shema Yisrael, they are parts of the Torah. And part of those portions of the Torah say, read this in the morning and at night, when you're on your way, when you're sitting up, when you're standing down, when you're going to sleep, when you're traveling, right? It tells you to read it, so that's where it starts from.
Self-referent.
Yes, that's right.
But when did it start as a prayer?
Well, that's a good question, because the prayer itself,
It's just reading on.
prayer itself wasn't necessarily formalized to many, many years after. This is a good question.
Ezra or
Well, Ezra and the Men of the Great Assembly. So Ezra was the founding leader of the Men of the Great Assembly.
around that time? You know what I mean?
Well, that's when. This is a good question, because we're so sidetracked. Well,
Yeah.
what the heck,
Okay,
right?
yes.
No, well, let's the Torah. According to, we read last week in the parasha, V'oso Savod. There's a mitzvah of worshiping God. How do you worship God? It's with prayer. It's a mitzvah. One of the mitzvahs of the Torah to pray. How do you pray? What do you say? So, in the 4th century before the Common Era, a bunch of rabbis, by the name that they were named, were the Men of the Great Assembly, which is essentially the Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is the central authority of the Jewish people, as if like the Supreme Court, if you will, founded by Moses, but it was the longest lasting branch of Jewish leadership, because Moses founds it, and it lasts all the way into the 4th century of the Common Era. So essentially it lasts for 1,700 years. Right? Both temples only last for 400 years and change of peace. Obviously, the Davidic monarchy lasts only a couple of hundred years. The prophets last for 500 years maybe. The judges, 16 judges, and then we have the Sanhedrin and unbroken throughout all history till the 4th century of the Common Era. But they are the ones who, in the 4th century before the Common Era, under the leadership of Ezra, they expand a little bit from 71 to 120 members. And by the way, the modern day Knesset, comprised of 120 members, is modeled after the 120 members of the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, Men of the Great Assembly. Knesset means assembly. That's why there's 120 members. And they're the ones who tell us what prayer is. So what's the deal? What do you have 900 years from when the time Moses says it's a mitzvah to pray every day till when it's actually formalized what you pray? So what were they praying beforehand? It's a good question. Don't you think?
I think so. Well, yeah. I mean, it's like mitzvot before they were formalized.
Well, no, but all the other mitzvahs are formalized.
Well, tzitzit.
Yeah, but there's no innovation that says what tzitzit is. It's the only mitzvah of its kind, really, that you say that there's a mitzvah to pray, and what it actually is, we only find till 900 years later. Is that a good question? I think so, right? Anyone here wants to venture an answer? So once again, the question. just to repeat. The Torah says, right, pray every day. Jewish tradition dates that about 3,300 years ago. Right? Come along to the Middle Assembly, and they say, well, how do you pray? So they outline the prayer with a prayer book. Right? Who wrote that? Middle Assembly. Okay, so we have 900 years from when we're told, pray every day, to when we're told what to say every day. What happened in the interim? What were they doing?
I'll give it a shot.
Go ahead.
They had the temple.
Well, okay, go ahead.
So they would sacrifice animals, and 3 times a year come and pray together.
Yeah, the Kohen Gadol would do everything for the people.
He would
They would
so
actually-
he's the only one who has the mitzvah to pray every day? Only Kohen Gadol?
Yes, I think at the time of the temple, he would do everything for the people.
Well, first of all, the temple only shows up 400 years. The permanent temple, right? Solomon's temple is about 450 years after Moses. Long time after Moses. So it's not the temple. You always say maybe the tabernacle or the Mishkan, which is the kind of the core of but that means there was no prayer. So yes, the Talmud does mention that the 3 prayers are modeled after the 3 daily sacrifices: the morning, the afternoon, and the evening sacrifices.
And the patriarchs, right?
And the Talmud says either this or that. Famous Talmud in the book of Brachos. Either Abraham established Shachris, and Isaac established Mincha, and Jacob established Ma'ariv. Or it's right, but either way, there was still a mitzvah to pray for everyone.
Well, just because the prayer isn't formalized, does it mean it's not a prayer?
Booyah! That's the correct answer.
Go Miriam.
That's the right answer. Exactly. What does it mean to pray? Prayer means to talk to God. Well, what do you say to God?
Well, in the Torah,
Whatever you want to say to God.
it's
In what language?
in different terms. And when they say they cry to God, or they
Exactly. It says that there's 10 lashonot of prayer. There's 10 different verbs used to describe prayer. Why? Because we have a very nuanced approach to prayer. Right? We're like Eskimos in snow. I don't know if you've heard that. The Eskimos have 9 or 7 words to describe snow. With us, it's just snow. Or
What are they?
slush. I don't know what they are.
Ben
but
probably knows.
but this is the heart. It's a good trivia. What are the 7 names of snow for Eskimos? But this is who we are as a nation. We are a nation that's close to God. How do we close? We're close to God. We're able to communicate with God. How do we communicate with God? By talking to Him. Well, what do you say? Whatever you want to say. In what language do you say it? Whatever language you want to say it. Right? When? Whenever. All times. At least every day. Right? How? How you would talk to your fellow. That's the mitzvah. That's what prayer is all about. And you know what? Today, unfortunately, let's go back to the story. So what happened? The rabbis realized that people aren't doing it. They aren't doing it, well, let's force them to do it. Come along to people in the Middle Assembly and say, people aren't fulfilling their duty kind of in their own way. Well, let's formalize it. Let's canonize it. Let's establish a binding text, a canon for what they ought to say. And then you know what? Now we're saying that because we're kind of handcuffed into doing the mitzvah. But does that mean that the essential method of prayer is scrapped? Of course not. But I think today one of the drawbacks of prayer like we have today, post-Middle Assembly, is the fact that a lot of people say, prayer, well, when's that? When's that scheduled? Oh, that's for Saturday morning. And you know what? It's in the temple, or in the synagogue, or in the shul. And you know what? We got to put on the funny clothing. And we got to speak in the funny language. Right? But when you formalize it, it becomes formal. And that's unfortunate. And I always advise people to get one of those little Bluetooths and make believe you're on the phone, but just talk to God. I was recently, where was I? I was at an airport. I actually followed my own advice. I actually had to do the formal prayer. And I was in the airport, my flight's delayed, and what are you going to do, right? And it's, the flight was delayed. Where was I? I was in Toronto. I was flying to New York, flying back to Houston. This was about 2.5 weeks ago. And it's about time for Shkia, for sunset. You got to say mincha. You got to daven mincha, right? And I'm in a packed, for whatever reason, they had put 3 separate flights, all scheduled to leave at the same time, at the same date. I don't know, it's Canadian logic, right? That's to do with the metric system or whatever. And I'm sitting there and So like I said, okay, I'll go pray, but what am I going to do? Stand in front of everyone, and it looks weird. So I took my phone out and turned it on or whatever. I just went like this and put it in my face and started praying, trying to pray by heart. And then I finished praying, and that's it. I walked to the corner as if I'm talking the phone. Yeah, of course I'm wearing it.
You already look weird. So. I was in Italy.
Okay.
And I was flying out of there, and I saw Jews praying. So there was actually a lot of Jews on my flight.
Yeah, sometimes
It wasn't all of them, but there was quite a few.
Sometimes people you have these flights across the Atlantic, so you have to the chakras is a much more complicated prayer because you got to put tefillin on and you got to put the talit on, and then there was two Chabad guys who were arrested on an Alaska flight because they thought they were strapping bombs to their heads. I'm not even joking, because you got to put these straps on, and you see these people with beards. And with straps, and they're huddling in a corner. What are you going to do, right? And this is Alaska. It's not like you're flying. It's not like you're flying to Israel or something like that. You see this every day.
I've seen it in the parking lot.
Oh yeah.
Talit is strapping on.
Whatever. So I just put I usually I pray plenty of times with the talis in the airport.
There's a lot more weird people on flights. So
That's true.
probably the least you have to worry about.
But either way.
My dad was in an airplane and a couple of Hasidim
Yeah.
went to him in the morning. He's like,
Davening.
are you up for a minyan?
Oh
They
yeah.
were trying to do a minyan. So my dad, I don't know how they
See, I don't like that.
recognize my dad.
I don't like that. I'll tell you why. Because what happens? You want to make a meeting on a plane. And planes were designed to be very small. Do you know why? Because it saves on fuel. And the number one goal of the airline industry is to not spend money on fuel, because that's their biggest expense. That decides if they make any money. You make a really narrow plane, a little cylinder. That's why you go into some planes, like these Embraers or Bombardiers or whatever they call them, and you're 6'1", perhaps,
You get the ceiling.
and you cannot stand. You cannot extend fully because you will bump your head. And the bathroom, you have to contort yourself like a question mark to fit in. Now the problem is that you have the Jews who really want to pray and want to pray with the minyan, right? But what do? Where are they going to go? It's not really. You can't just go to the chapel or the USO or whatever they call it, the USO room. There's no extra room, so they just huddle around places. And then other people want to go to the bathroom, and they see a bunch of what they would assume is really bearded, strange-looking men congregating.
Men in black with
Speaking a weird language.
Whatever, and it's not, we don't want people to be inconvenienced by our religion. It's not a good thing for us. It's not a Kiddush Hashem, it's not. That's why I know a lot of very, very venerated and respected rabbis that would never miss a minyan on terra firma. But when they're in the year, terra firma means land. But when they're in the year, if they want to daven, they would see to not inconvenience everyone. You have these alal flies, and the Jews think that they own the place, right? Well, yes, they technically do, whatever. And then you have it's 4:30 in the morning, and some guy wants to sleep. Who knows what time zone people are in? And then the guy's just saying, davening, let's make a minyan. And is that really what's right to do? We're supposed to have a minyan. Well, is that really? I don't know. It's an open question. I'm not trying to indict anyone. I'm saying, me personally, I don't participate in minyans on planes.
The question is, can you read the Torah? If it's Thursday.
I'm sure it's been done. I'm sure it's been done. Either way, so back to the point that I was mentioning, that one of the drawbacks of having formalized prayer is that we assume, quite naturally, that that's what prayer is all about. Prayer is going to a synagogue, right, schmoozing with your friends first, right, putting on funny clothing, speaking a very foreign language that's, this ancient Semitic language we call Hebrew. Most of us, or some of us at least, have no idea what we're saying. And participating in some service that I guess was formalized 2,500 years ago, more or less. Is that really what it's all about? Is that what we're relegated to? Is that what one of these core elements of Jewish life, which is communicating with God? Is that really what it's all about?
No.
Absolutely not. And the answer to it is that we have to find a way to not lose sight of what prayer really is all about, and that's talking to God. So I have advised people that it's better for you to not ever step foot in the synagogue. And don't ever wear a talit. Right? But pray. You don't need a talit to pray. Right? All you need is you know, your thoughts, and you don't need a lot of time for it. When you're walking from your cubicle to the water cooler, may that be a proverbial water cooler or whatever kind of water cooler you have some time. You could talk to God. You know? And there's no reason why we should be talking to God 100 times a day. No reason why. Why not? Right? You're walking from here to there, talk to God. Say, I'm about to walk into some guy's house. Dana, oh gosh, I'm going to give a class, and what if I mess up? God help me that I don't give a good class. Right? Clearly wasn't accepted the prayer, but no, but like that's a good kind of, that means your God's involved in your life. Prayer means that you're inviting, so to speak, God into your life, and you're also offloading your problems into God. Anytime you have a problem, your kid is cranky up in the middle of the night with a fever. I'm sure a lot of people have experienced that, right? Or you have a challenging phone call you need to make in your professional life, right? Get God involved. Why does it have to be only in your head? Why can you? If your dad was a billionaire, well, maybe he is, maybe. For most people, right? If your dad was a billionaire, would you not try to utilize his connections to try to advance your life? Of course you would. Listen, your dad is God. We say Avinu Malkeinu. We call the Almighty God, creator of heaven and earth. We call him our Father. Why would we not say, hey, I have some important phone call you need to make. Maybe help me with this. Right? Why? It's silly. Right? Because we have disconnected what prayer is really all about as a result of it being formalized. Dana, you were saying something.
Oh, I was going to say that I fully agree with you. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's nice to pray with family and friends in a common area, but wherever I'm at, as long as I'm breathing, that's a place where I can find sanctuary and speak to God. So I fully agree with that.
And I encourage every one of you, if you haven't tried it, to try it. Talk to God in your car when no one's listening.
Especially in traffic. I fully agree with it.
Yeah, when you're in the
Because that's
Why did you get to the HOV?
Oh, I saw that this morning.
Oh my God, that's
A car caught on fire in the
Oh, I
HOV
saw
once
that.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
this morning.
Was everyone right?
I hope so. I saw people like behind it, and I think it was their car, so I think they were fine. But the actual car itself was not fine. Total.
I can imagine. Either way, let's get back to the Shema. So I want to give you guys some more of my thoughts on the issue before we actually dig into the actual text. The Chafetz Chaim, everyone remembers we talked about the Chafetz Chaim? It was, I guess, 3 weeks ago. We spoke about Lashon Hara. That was in your house. That was in your house, I believe. Lashon Hara. We spoke about Lashon Hara.
That's what we're talking
Right.
about. How's Lashon Hara? That's what you're
Were you
implying.
there that night?
So he said as follows: he gave a parable, example, an analogy about the Shema. He says that there was this guy who had this very complex factory. A lot of dials and levers or levers and complicated machinery, and he has this apprentice, and he's going to, and the boss is going on vacation for 3 months. And he tells the apprentice, listen, I want you to make sure that you don't screw it up all out. And he gives him the instructions, give you the detailed instructions. And he says, these instructions are so important, I want you to write them all down and put them on every doorpost. So every time you'll just see it, you put them on your doorpost. I want you to make the contraption that you actually bound it to your skull and your arms. And I want you to say it every day, declare it in the morning and night. Don't screw up the instructions. Yeah? That's what he says. That's what it's all about. God here is giving us keys to the world. Right? Remember, this is our world. We are the ones who are deciding what happens. Tikkun Olam, which is the Jewish mission, is in our hands. If we don't do it, it won't get done. God's entrusting us with this factor. And he says, there's instructions how to make sure that this thing works. And they're really important when you put them in every doorpost. Every time you walk through a doorpost, which is thousands of times a day, perhaps, I don't know, if you're more sedentary, then maybe it's less, but it's potentially hundreds of times a day. Hundreds. Yeah. Say it in the morning, say it at night, say the Shema. Right? Wrap the tefillin into your head, put them next to your heart. That's what it's doing. He's telling us, don't screw up the factory. That's what the Shema is about. The Shema is the declaration of the instructions that we are given to make sure that the world works, to make sure that the world comes to its completion, that we're able to achieve what it is that is our destiny and our mission to achieve. And I have a little modern update to this parable. Back to the airplanes. The most a lot of frustrating things about your air travel today. I think probably the most frustrating is that those 10 minutes for those of us sitting in economy, waiting for everyone else to, you're taxiing and you finally get to your gate, and then the plane kind of settles to it kind of exhales, and then everyone quickly up and getting their stuff, and then waiting, and you wait for 10 minutes till all the fancy people leave, and then everyone else shuffles, and you kind of are always tempted with how do I get in front of everyone to leave this cylinder that's been my home for.
They're not fancy people.
It's
They're
called
people that
patience.
have no life, that travel every other week.
Hey, sometimes the company pays for those seats.
Yeah,
I'm
but
sorry.
they do glare. They do sometimes, they're first. They're pampered, It's just.
Oh,
They
hey,
did pay more.
Yeah, well.
The company did pay more.
Yeah, okay, whatever. I'm not
it
judging.
ain't worth it. You ain't paying for that yourself. Believe me, I've looked at those seats. Too expensive.
But at the beginning of the flight, there's these announcements that I'm sure all of us have heard them dozens of times, right? Do not tamper with, disable, or destroy the smoke detectors, or what to do in case there's a landing on water. I sat by the exit seat a few times, the instructions in case we have to land. All I want you to do is pull the lever, take the door in, and then throw it out. No problem, I'll do it as long as I don't have anyone in it. To me, I have 4 more inches of space, I'll accept anything. And to us, it's yes, in the unlikely event that we're not really landing on water, it's not really happening. We all know that. But, we go through every day, and we have to suffer. This is one of the rituals of modern life, is that you have to kind of suffer through these repetition of all these instructions, right? What else is there? Oh, whenever we travel with kids, a bunch of little kids. So, first you put your mask on, and then you put the mask on the kids. I guess because otherwise the parent obviously trying to save the kid, and then they're deprived of oxygen, and no one ends up getting their masks. That's what I assume the reason why. Either way, there's these list of credos that are announced to everyone before the flight. Now, I want to ask you guys a question. I don't like those announcements, but assuming we were in control, let's assume that we had the ability to just do away with it. Would any one of us responsibly do away with it, or not? Why not? Because the odds of it happening are incredibly slim. Has anyone here ever been on an airplane that lost oxygen? It's very, very unlikely. I would assume it's less than 1 every 10,000. Something like that. 10,000, 20,000. Landing on water, those things almost never happen. People don't smoke on airplanes, and people don't smoke anywhere anymore. I guess some people do, but you really want someone's going to tamper with, disable, or destroy. Okay, but if it does happen, it's a bad thing or whatever. I think we could all agree that if we were in charge, we wouldn't want to get rid of it. But
I would.
you would. Okay, maybe you
It
would.
saves time.
You save.
But if I own the company and it makes the insurance payments cheaper, I'd keep them. That's why they do it.
That's probably what they do.
Yeah, but you're taxing anyway, you got time.
There's time.
Well, yeah, there is time, and that's usually when they do it. But the reason they really do it is for insurance purposes.
This is
Well,
like
federal law. I think it might be federal law. Federal law prohibits tampering the same. Either way.
It's like the
Let me ask you guys a question.
Well, there's more stuff that's against federal law, but they don't talk about it because
Well, it
it's
might
not
be
going to apply to the insurance purposes and won't rise costs.
Maybe.
They say you can't have a gun on the plane. It's illegal. They don't say why. Because it doesn't matter.
I think it's
You can get it through TSA.
Yeah, actually you can.
You actually can.
But they don't say.
So, let me ask you guys a question. Let's imagine that every single airplane that ever went into the sky landed on water. Every single airplane went into the sky lands on water. And every single time you're on the plane, the cabin loses loses this oxygen, right?
Every time you're on the plane?
Every time you're on the plane.
Okay.
Then would anyone in their right mind say we shouldn't say this? We shouldn't make those announcements? Even Dennis, even if in our life, and the kind of air travel that we have today, we would do away with it. But if it happened every single time, we would say it 10 times over, right?
No.
This is important. Landing on water, and
Everyone
you
would
could
know
live or
this.
die if how well you fulfill these instructions. I think the Shema is our preparation for what life is going to bring, and life will invariably bring these situations. We got to know what to do. Shema is our declaration we do in the morning before our flight, so to speak, which is what we're going to tackle that day. And that is going to be a little, microcosm of what life is really about. And that is engaging in this arena that the Almighty created for us. And it's an arena full of pitfalls by design. And that these things will happen. Right? Every time we kind of take off on this plane, we're going to have to deal with eventualities. We're going to have to deal with landing on water or, whatever other obstacles the Almighty has planted for us. We say the Shema because we are preparing for that flight. Go ahead.
Okay. Then why don't people
Dennis,
do it?
let's start off. That was an amazing parable.
The what?
It was an amazing parable. Start off like that. Okay.
That was an amazing.
Thank you.
But then why do people do not say the prayers before the start off the day? The Shema.
I don't know. I think maybe people don't realize this.
If people knew that the plane was going to land in water, do you not think that they would automatically learn the precautions they need to take for this ahead of time?
Yes.
They would listen.
I'd drive.
I would.
But isn't this a lot more dangerous?
I will
than
tell you.
flying?
I'll tell you the answer. I'll tell you the answer. The answer is like this: is that we go through life not realizing necessarily that we're landing in water.
Why not?
Why is that? Because our bodies, quote unquote, in the paradigm of the body and soul relationship, our body is of foremost importance in our consciousness, while our soul is of lesser importance.
Why?
That's just the model, because otherwise the free will paradigm wouldn't work.
Well, that was when you're born. It's 50-50.
Well, no.
No.
Well,
The body is born.
define born and define 50-50. Absolutely not. That's the correct answer. I have lots of
So it's
sources
more.
for these also.
No.
The,
So
the,
it's
the
more on
body is overwhelmingly
More. Okay.
dominating the soul.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why.
That makes sense.
There's
No,
a
it's
simple
fine.
answer. You don't.
Believe me, I can look it up tomorrow. All
Yes.
day, I have nothing.
You have if you don't eat food for 2 days or you don't drink water for 2 days,
No,
you'll
I
die.
understand. But same with spiritually. I
But
feel
if you
like
don't study Torah for a month or a year, you'll be
spiritually,
fine.
No, you're spiritually.
Spiritually, you're dead, but how
Yes.
close is that to your consciousness?
That's
Very distant.
But if nobody studies Torah for a single second,
That's true. That's true, because if you pull the plug, the spiritual plug in the world, you remember that. Good callback. That's right. In the 23 Reasons Why We Study Torah, right? That's right.
23?
Yeah, we came up with 23. We gave, for those of you who haven't been there, we had 3 different
23.
discussions on 23 Reasons Why We Study Torah. And one of them was the fact that if we didn't study Torah, the world would just cease to exist. Go ahead.
In your example with the airport instructions,
Yes.
right? If I actually had to do that, I wouldn't know how. Like
How to
open
do
up
what?
the door or whatever they tell you.
put a mouse-
Emergency.
Do you listen to the instructions?
You would.
Oh,
Well,
yeah,
you
I forgot
would.
what.
So, if you had to open up that exit door on the airplane your first time, do you think you're going to be able to do it? Hey, this is great. I know how to do it. Blah blah blah. No.
Yeah, but
So-
the reason why not, because I probably didn't pay too much attention to the instructions, because
Well, you
to
never-
me it was such a distant, implausible.
Not only that, you never practiced. You never did it before.
you probably can.
And they
You can. You,
Yeah, I
you
think it's just
simply
a
know.
live,
Yeah.
and it has like
You will be able
illustrations.
It's designed
very
that way.
complicated.
I don't know.
It's very
Well,
I wouldn't
either
make
way,
that
what-
assumption.
what
Either
you-
way, you're making that analogy to Shema,
Yes.
saying that it's getting preparation, but what if it's just like the exit sign? What if you're just hearing it, but hey, I don't know how to do that exit sign?
Yeah. So that's where mindfulness comes in.
That's
If you're not mindful about it,
when you're sitting
I
in Mexico,
could probably
they
say the
if you can
Shema.
stand the heat, get out of the kitchen.
I could probably say
Well, what
the
about
Shema.
even the mask? I mean,
I could probably say
You
the
should
Shema
know how to
on
put a
bed.
mask.
have you ever tried actually?
Put a
I mean,
mask.
yeah.
I have. For
I put on a mask before. It's not that straightforward. Not an airline mask. I put on for the space shuttle, for the space station.
Oh, when you went to the ISS.
Yeah,
So-
when I went to ISS, I was trained for emergency. No, for real. I put on a mask.
So-
It's not straightforward.
For your orbit, so.
It definitely was not. I would, if I was in an emergency, I would not have put that mask on and be like, oh, okay, this is how it works, and blah blah blah.
So is the moral here, don't sit near you guys on the exit row?
If I see you on that
Because
scroll,
you're
I'm
not
asking
gonna
to
go
move
from
you.
Yeah.
If I see any of them in the exit row, I say, I'm out of this plane.
The moral of the story is Ben 1.0 should be a responsible citizen and not sit on the exit row.
They ask you, are you
Just take
capable
a
of...
look.
Yes.
So,
if you're not
They answer
capable of
truthfully.
helping
Yeah,
out,
it'll take me a few minutes over here. You know,
that's too long.
that's too long.
Can you ask that if you don't feel capable, please tell your flight attendant?
Yes.
yeah,
How
but
about my 4 inches?
exactly.
Yeah.
But I think you bring a very crucial point, and that is that yes, while the Shema is essentially life-saving instructions, it is still possible to say them and not be mindful of them, and therefore not have them affect you in any way. I tell you, there's 248 words in Shema, by the way. And who here, does that number ring a bell to anyone? 248? Anybody?
Yeah.
That's the number of negative or positive.
That's right. And the number of positive commandments in the Torah, 248. And additionally, the number of limbs in a human body is 248 limbs. The idea of the Shema is that it's a total completion of perfection would be if you incorporate the laws of Shema, you have all 248 limbs there. But anyway, I could say the 248 words of Shema probably in 12 seconds. I could do it. Just, is that meaningful? Is that mindful? Is that impactful? Is that life-changing? Is that really taking instructions and planning the day for the obstacles and the eventualities that are going to happen? No, of course not. So what does that mean? That means is that to actually maximize and actualize the power of the Shema, you have to pay attention. You have to say it slowly and thoughtfully and mindfully.
Well, typically people say the first sentence slowly and mindfully, and the Be'avta is like...
And to me, this was to me was one of the big takeaways, is that Shema has so much to offer for us as Jews, and especially people that have an interest to Jewish philosophy and Jewish worldview and Jewish meaning and Jewish life and Jewish vibrancy. Yet, unfortunately, at least in my case, all too often you weren't actually maximizing, utilizing this opportunity, and that's very unfortunate. And it's as if there was instructions that could be enormously beneficial for you, but you weren't actually following them or internalizing them. So maybe that's one of the takeaways of tonight's discussion would be the fact that once we realize how important the Shema really is, how impactful, and how the necessity of having it every day, etc., and putting it in the mezuzah. By the way, if you open a mezuzah, what's written inside the mezuzah? Who knows? The Shema.
Made in China.
Assembled in Mexico.
It says the first two chapters of the Shema. Now, the first two chapters of the Shema. If you open up a tefillin, this is, by the way, something which is discouraged. Do not open tefillin. You know what you're doing.
You unkosherize it.
It's very easy to mess up. But let's say you were to open up your tefillin, what would you find? Well, it depends which tefillin you open. Right? You know the tefillin of the arm, the tefillin of the head. The arm has one compartment and one parchment. On the parchment, you will find 4 sections of the Torah. 2 of them from Exodus, and 2 of them from Deuteronomy. The 2 of them from Deuteronomy are the first and second chapters of the Shema. So, I don't remember how I got here.
Shema.
Yeah, I think that the
The band with the mask.
the man with the mask.
You need to Shema yourself.
You know what?
You need to Shema yourself.
You need to pay attention. You need to be mindful. Now, additionally, I want to say some other cool tidbits here to know that the Talmud says that in the very first paragraph of the Shema, you find the 10 Commandments. Now, what would the Ten Commandments have to do with the Shema? It doesn't seem to really have much overlap. The Ten Commandments are Ten Commandments, Mount Sinai, on these tablets, and the Shema is the prayer we say every day, and the tefillin. But the truth is that the Ten Commandments are indeed a microcosm of the entire Torah. And that's why it's so critical to have them separate, as if we kind of heard the entire Torah at Mount Sinai, a very, very highly concentrated version of it. And then the very first two of the Ten Commandments, right, if anyone here is familiar, we know, we read a few weeks ago, that the Jewish people originally started hearing the Ten Commandments from God. And they couldn't handle it. They come to Moses and say, Moses, this is a bad idea. Why don't you speak to us instead? We like it much better like that. So who here knows after how many commandments did God hand over the reins to Moses? Anybody knows here?
3, right? Or 3?
After the first 2 commandments, or the third one, Moses takes over. So we have the Ten Commandments, the first 2, the Jewish people hear from God. The Talmud says that they couldn't handle it. They died. They had to be brought back together, back to life. They died again, and they brought back to life. Right? Why? Because these were people that were not designed, or not at the level where prophecy was appropriate. Prophecy was not a wavelength that they were able to be receptive of.
So why did God approach them then? Would he not know their level of capability?
So the question is, why is it important that they hear this from God? And it's so important that even if it means that even if they're unworthy of prophecy, it's inorganic prophecy. So it's one of the very few examples of prophecy that's not deserved. We know Maimonides, by the way, gives us very easy instructions how to gain prophecy. Very simple. All we got to do is follow the instructions. 4 or 5 simple instructions. You know what they are? You have to be someone who does all the positive mitzvahs and refrains from all the negative mitzvahs. Okay, so far so good. You have to be a great scholar of all of Torah. You have to be someone of perfect character, not a single flaw. You have to be someone who is total isolation of mind, body, and soul to God. Nothing else matters. You do that, you have prophecy. Simple.
Piece of cake.
Simple.
Why didn't you tell me?
Exactly. Simple formula. All you got to do is that. Well, the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, the entire nation was granted prophecy. Well, was the entire nation worthy of prophecy? Not necessarily. Why would they be worthy of prophecy? Right? Moses was, so he's able to handle it. Right? They weren't. They're not able to handle it. They died. Well, why would God want to give them this inorganic form of prophecy? And by the way, we have another example of someone who's had a prophecy that's undeserved. Balaam, exactly. Balaam. And what do we know about what's the postscript of the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, and what's the postscript of Balaam? They follow very similar patterns.
Balaam dies.
Well, Balaam dies, but first he tries to kill as many Jews as he possibly can.
Right. And then
Doesn't seem to be a very kind of spiritually centric activity to say, you know what, I talked to God, and God says don't go curse the Jewish people. I'll do it anyhow and try to kill as many Jews as I can. And manages to take 24,000 Jews with him. And the Jewish people, 40 days after they have prophecy in Mount Sinai, they do the golden calf. Clearly, not only is it inorganic, it's actually not beneficial. It's not beneficial for you to suddenly be told, oh, you're a prophet. That's not a good thing for you. Why? Because if it's something that you deserve, if it's organic growth, so to speak, well, then it makes sense, then it's right, then it's appropriate. Otherwise, it's actually, not only it's not appropriate, it's deleterious. So why it's a question that Dana's asking is ever more so strong. Why did the Jewish people have to have the first 2 commandments from God himself? And the answer is, I'll reference a Maharsha, one of the commentators, the 16th century commentary on the book of Makros. The book of Makros is one of the 63 books of the Mishnah, which deals with Makros. What does Makros mean? Makros means judicial enforcement. So one of the laws or in the section that talks about section of Jewish law that talks about law and jurisprudence and assigning courts, etc. It talks about how the court actually metes out their enforcement. How do they enforce it? And one of the ways they did it is by makro, which means to hit the guy. Right? They would have the ability, they have police power. But either way, at the end of that particular book, it talks about how various Jewish leaders tried to crystallize Judaism. Right? Boil it down to its core fundamental principles. And famously, Habakkuk came, the great prophet Habakkuk, and he came and said, there's only one thing, and that's faith. Sadik b'manas yichya. Either way, in there, the commentary of the Maharsha, he says that the first two of the Ten Commandments are all the entire Torah put together. If you look at the first two Ten Commandments, it contains the entire 613 mitzvahs. How so? First commandment is, I am the Lord your God. Second commandment is, you have no other gods. Those two include all positive and all negative mitzvahs. When you do a mitzvah, why do you do a positive mitzvah? You put your tefillin on, you eat your matzah, right? You blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. You are doing something because God told you to do it. You are affirming commandment 1. You withhold from doing something that God says don't do. You don't eat the pork because the bacon, the aforementioned bacon, because God says no. Okay, well then you're not going against God. It's a fulfillment of the second commandment. Thus, at its core, the first two of the Ten Commandments really include everything. God wanted the Jewish people to hear everything, at least at least in its concentrated form, from God Himself. Thus, the Jewish people can essentially say, we heard the entire Torah from God. We didn't have to have any proxy, any emissary, any go-between in the form of Moses. That's the answer. And even though, yes, it's not an ideal way, it's inorganic and maybe even injurious to the people, but we have to know that the Torah that we got, at least at its, at the core two founding principles of the Torah we got from God Himself. The Ten Commandments, the Ten Commandments are also a synthesis of the entire Torah on a little bit more of a, spread out, broad principle. And we talk about the Shema being this declaration of Judaism. Well, that's going to include the entire Ten Commandments. So it says the Talmud in Yerushalmi that in the very first chapter, very first paragraph of the Shema, we have the Ten Commandments. We could safely say that when we say the Shema, we are kind of really going through all that the Torah really expects of us. Everything in a very shortened format. Okay, so let's actually talk about the Shema. After an hour and 17-minute introduction, what does the Shema actually say? So I apologize. I was trying to print out little printouts of what the Shema, of the words of the Shema. There's this, I think probably everyone has in life things that just absolutely confound them, and no matter what you do, they don't work, or they don't acquiesce or submit themselves to your will no matter what, or you're never able to just conquer something. I don't know. For me, it's printers. No matter what I tried to do, it wouldn't print.
It's an HP printer?
It's a brother printer.
Here's the problem.
What?
I talked to the HP here.
Oh, somebody works at HP? Oh.
I like brother. They have Linux drivers.
Oh.
HP doesn't.
Oh,
Shame
bro.
on YouTube.
All I know is that it has sleep and deep sleep. That's its two modes. It's either sleeping or in deep sleep. And I'm trying. I want it to print. I want it to be ready. Either way, I don't know. I tried. I'm telling you. I sat there for 15 minutes trying to get the print. I don't know. Either way, so I apologize for that.
Send us the file. We'll hook you up.
When you get there tomorrow, they will be there.
You have to be a big stack.
Any times that you try to print.
So I remember there was this joke in the Reader's Digest about this intern at the company, and he sees the befuddled-looking CEO holding a document, by the shredder, and the guy sees him. He doesn't know where to do this complicated machinery. You don't know where to put it in. So the guy tells him, "Can I help you with that?" He says, "Yes, this is very, very important. I need your help." So he says, "Sure." He shows him where to put it. He put it in. He's like, "Okay." And as it's being swept in, the CEO says, "I only need one copy of it."
Oh my goodness.
That's the joke. Oops, exactly. Okay, so let's start with the first of the Ten Commandments. I have it written down here on my phone, and I'll read you what it says. This is from the Art Scroll translation. They did it's not a literal translation. It's a functional translation. It's a very good one. And it says, let's start with the first sentence. Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem, the one and only. That's their translation of Shema Yisrael. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. So it starts off kind of, I think, very much in line with what we have been saying till now. Shema Yisrael means pay attention, right? Wake up. We're about to say instructions. And this is Shema Yisrael. It's the Jewish people. Who is that? That's all of us. That's Yisrael is the nation in its entirety, right? Because if what will proceed is something that's so essential to the Jewish mission, it makes a lot of sense to say Shema Yisrael. Then it gets into problem territory. Hashem Elokeinu.
It's the other way around.
Well,
No,
Hashem is our God. We are invoking two names of God, and this is actually a pattern throughout the entire Torah. That there is many names. In fact, this is just the two most common ones, but there are a lot of names that we call God. Now, why would we call God with different names? Are we referring to different entities?
Different attributes, different faces, different way we perceive God.
This is a very important thing, because if you want to interpret the different names as being different entities, which typically you would do, you run into some problems. Actually, you run into some major problems in Jewish theology, because we don't believe in God having different elements, different entities, different qualities, or God is one, we say. So why are we giving different names? The answer is that, well, yeah, but it's not even kindness. The way Diego, I don't know if you've realized how marvelously you explained it.
No.
You did it, right? It's not about the different qualities of God, but it's the different perceived qualities of God from our perspective. And that we can say God, if you say God is angry, you are encroaching on one of the core beliefs of the Jewish people. And this is the first page of Maimonides. He says, God, right, you cannot assign a certain quality to God, because that flies in the face of the very definition of God. Yet you open the Torah, we read a few weeks ago that God got angry at Moses. So God was angry. Well, so is he angry or is he not angry? The answer is that God is not angry. Essentially, from God's perspective, he is not angry. However, from Moses' perspective, he perceives God as acting to him in a way that one typically associates with anger. And that subtlety is a very important one. God, the eyes of God are always watching Israel. We read that 2 weeks ago in the Parsha. God has eyes, really? Well, no. If you say God has eyes, you're saying God has parts, or God has elements of a body. The idea of a God incarnate, that's not a Jewish idea. Decidedly so. One of the 13 principles of Maimonides, of the basic fundamental beliefs of Judaism, is that God has no parts and God is not a body. God is not associated in any way with like a body. So what does it mean God has eyes? So this is literally the first page of Maimonides. He deals with this question. And the answer that he says is what you're saying, is that it's a way of talking to us in a language we understand. But essentially it's not a description of fact. Similarly, we talked about God is our king, or God is our Hashem is our God. We are not describing different even facets of God. Rather, we're describing different perceived behaviors of God.
There's a quote that says, "We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are." So it's got to have that vantage point where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. And but this particular point is why theology is so confounding, because, or at least Jewish theology, because we're creating these two realms that have no overlap. And we're giving definitions, but inherent in the definition is the fact that we cannot understand it because we're from the other realm.
So we have to use those words in that vantage point?
Well, yes, but even the words don't even help us.
No.
Because they just tell us that we can't understand. Because they're describing the fact that we're talking about different realities. Which is why it's so appealing to say that, to try to anthropomorphize God, to try to make God finite, because that is making it possible for us to understand it. Yeah, well, the Torah does that in a way, but that could be very much misunderstood for what it actually means. Either way, so we have The Almighty is our God, is our King, and the Almighty is one. Now,
can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Elokeinu.
Yes.
That's my Hebrew. That's not as good.
That's good.
Elokeinu is our God, right?
That's right.
So why is it says Elohim Shelanu?
Well,
So it's okay.
You indicate not to say the word that you just said.
yes. So the word.
Because the word that I say is
You don't want to say their name, so you say Elokeinu, just to change the word.
I thought that was the part of the name that
No,
you could
but
say.
you're not praying.
Because you
You're
said
saying
Hashem
it
right
that way.
before. And you don't.
Hashem is fine.
Hashem is fine.
Hashem is yeah.
Okay, the thing is a cute, important tidbit that'll answer your question.
Okay, that's the kid that is
Yeah. So, one of the quote-unquote proofs of the Christian model of God is the actual word of Elohim. I'm telling I pronounce Elohim. Right? One of the words, like we said, to describe God is that it's in Hebrew it means the plurality. It's a term for plurality. Many Elohas would be an Elohim. And if we describe God as being multiple, well, there you go. Right? We just described more than one entity. And then we have in the same sentence, God is one. So God's not multiple entities. So which one is it? So as to the nature of the word Elohim, in Hebrew, it does actually not mean God. It actually does not mean God. It's probably a more precise way of saying that. What does the word Elohim mean? Anyone knows?
But that's not one of the forbidden words, Elohim.
That's true. But
Okay.
conversely, we do use it to describe God. But the word Elohim means power, or powers. You guys have examples?
Judgmental side of, right? God.
Yes, as well. But God tells Moses. Moses is hesitating. He doesn't want to go to Pharaoh. God tells him, you don't worry about it. I will make you an Elohim to Pharaoh. Va'ata tielo Elohim. You'll be. If you just read this, you say, wait a minute. Moses is going to be a god to Pharaoh? No. That says Moses is going to dominate Pharaoh. He's going to have the power. Another example. Ad ha'Elohim yavod varshtem. Two people have a dispute. I say you owe me money. He says, no, you don't owe me money. We have a monetary dispute. We go to Elohim. What does that mean? You go to God? That means you go to the court. Right? The court is referenced as Elohim because it means power. Or powers even. Powers that be. We describe God's total control and power. We use the term Elokim. Now I say Elokim because this is a reference to God and we don't say God's name. So therefore, when we're referring to God, we say Elokim because we don't say God's name in vain. However, when we're referring to other powers, we can say Elohim, no problem. Make sense? So kind of define where the definition is and why we say it a little bit differently the way it's pronounced. Right? But when we're actually saying it for its correct purpose, like when you're saying the Shema, you don't say Elokim, you say the Hey instead of the Kuf. Does that make sense here?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so now I want you guys to look maybe in the Torah scroll, if you have a chance, to actually look at this verse in the Torah scroll. You'll find something very bizarre. It's a very bizarre. You look at it, and something will look wrong. What's that? Right, so there's two letters of the Shema that are bigger than the other letters. Every single Torah scroll you'll read has the same. It looks like it's a mistake, as if the guy wrote the big letters. He went off line. But every single Torah scroll has that the ayin, the last letter of the word Shema, and the last word of Echad, the last of the 6 words of the first sentence, the Dalet is bigger, and that spells out the word aid. And aid means a witness. And the idea being is that this statement, this is a testimony. But as Jews, we're getting up and we're declaring something. What are we declaring? The most important principles of our religion, of our life, of our philosophy, of our theology. And in fact, as a nice callback, we will say that the first 2 of the 10 Commandments are included in the first sentence of the Shema. How so? We say, Hashem is our God. That's commandment number 1. Hashem is one. There's only one. There's no other powers. Don't believe in any other gods. Well, there you go. It's Hashem Echad. Essentially, the first sentence of the Shema, those 6 words, they include the first 2 of the 10 Commandments, And by proxy, they include the entire Torah. Thus, if you had to think of a really nice motto for the Jewish people that really incorporates everything, you would come up with the Shema.
Actually, the Ayin and Dalet is for Einat and Danit, my two daughters.
Okay.
So, Rabbi, I have a question. So, God wrote the Torah, like He wrote it.
Well, I'm just finicky for precision. Moshe wrote it as per the dictation of God. Go
Okay,
ahead.
My apologies.
No problem.
The word of
The word of God, yes, exactly.
Okay. The Torah is the word of God, but He dictated to Moses in the way we would perceive it.
The way we would perceive what it means. You're saying,
Because you said he.
like we
you
said, the eyes of
he-
God, exactly.
Well, the attributes of God, where He gets
Go
out
ahead,
or
yes.
whatever. So I just find that I haven't heard that perspective.
Yeah, well, the Torah is given to the humans.
But
There's a
He knew
famous
how we would
sentence.
perceive His actions towards
God
us.
knew that?
Yeah, right.
course
So
God
that's
knew
why He wrote it in that format.
Yeah, it's presented to us. There's a famous line that's said many times in Jewish literature, Lo nitna Torah l'malachei hasharis. Torah was not given to the angels. If the Torah was given to the angels, who knows what it would have been written to them. This is written to us. It was given to us. And therefore it's written for us. It's optimized. It's optimized.
Optimized.
Exactly. This is the 3.0 version, right? It's perfectly designed for humans.
Well, it's the Torah optimized for humans, or humans are optimized for the Torah?
I would say both of them are probably true, because it's a good point,
Well,
because
it's God, the Shemidrash, right? That
it's
God
not
consulted
right,
the Torah to
exactly.
create the world.
That's a good point, yeah. Either way, supremely optimized so therefore, yes, it's written for us. You know, in fact, there's this great Talmud. We learned that together.
What?
We learned to study Talmud. We studied this Talmud together. I don't know if we got up there. We might have not gotten up there. So Moses goes up to heaven, and there's angels there. By the way, how does Moses go up to heaven? How does he not eat for 40 days and 40 nights? Anyone has any idea how to answer that question? We read it a few weeks ago in the Parsha. Moses goes up, and he doesn't eat for 40 days and 40 nights. If we don't eat for 40 days and 40 nights, we die. Right? Why? Because we have a body. Moses goes up. Moses has a body as well. Moses has a body. He goes up, but he doesn't eat 40 days and 40 nights. Doesn't read 40 days and 40 nights. How does he not die? Is that a question? Or is that like a silly question? Well, God's there, God kind of infuses him with life. Maybe that's probably the simplest answer.
Probably he didn't eat because his Yiddish mama was not with him.
Eat your veggies, huh? Eat your Wheaties. Is that a good question, guys? Is that a bad question or a good question? What do you guys think? It's a good question, right? Or you could, but there's an easy answer. Say, well, Moses is a prophet, and Moses communicating directly with God, and who needs food? You know, I think that's probably a legitimate answer. You know, but that's a rebuffing of the question. I think that it's possible. Throw it out over here, guys. I already resigned that we're not going to finish what I had prepared. So
We just started this, right?
I still have a lot more to say about this.
We'll do part 2 next week.
Yeah, maybe I'll do part 2 next week. It's not a bad idea. So we spoke about prophecies. We said there's the organic form of prophecy and there's the inorganic form of prophecy. What happens if God were to speak to any one of us? What would happen to us? Anyone knows? We die. Why? Because our body is entirely physical, and therefore it has absolutely no overlap with the other realm, which is God. So therefore, God is communicating, and it's like you put the plug in I'm trying to think of a nice electrical. Like you plug the plug in, there's too much amperage. To the socket, there's too much amperage, and just everything just explodes. It's not designed to have that kind of interface.
So what's the surge protector then? Who's the surge protector? Moses for getting it?
He was the
Maybe.
future. He was the future.
We got a lot of analogies to that. Huh? So God speaks to us. We die. Why? Because we are primarily physical, and therefore God is entirely spiritual, and the spiritual and physical do not mesh really well. Moses is a prophet. Well, what does a prophet do? A prophet is able to change that balance of body-soul. So it's more soul, less body, and to the degree which someone is able to expose their soul and minimize their body, they're essentially opening up a line of communication with God. That's why it's very natural. It's organic. It's not like it's something, oh, you earned it. Let's give you the prize. It's actually you create the receptacles to have communication with God by exposing your soul and mitigating and attenuating and limiting your body. And if your body, to the degree that your body is not a factor, well, then your soul is entirely dominating you. That's what's controlled. That's your consciousness. That's who you are. And therefore, well, the soul can very naturally have a interface with God. That's why prophecy is not something that you just get because you deserve it. You get it because you build it. Right? If you build, oh no, I'm not going that way. Sorry, scratch that from the record, right? But it's kind of the natural progression of someone exposing their soul, limiting their body, and therefore they are creating the conduit to connect to God and to have prophecy. That's why it's a formula. All you got to do is follow the formula and you got the prophecy. Now, Moses is someone who perfected the formula. In fact, we find that Maimonides recounts 4 differences between Moses' prophecy and everyone else's prophecy. Everyone else's prophecy is the middle of the night. Moses is the middle of the day. Why? Because
In
everyone...
such a case, there's God that address directly Moses.
I'm sorry?
But we've read in the Torah that God, at one point, also addressed directly a non-Jew.
Bilam. That's right.
That is,
That's a very good question.
She's not as ready as Moses was.
And we even mentioned, the Talmud even asked, why did Bilam have prophecy? It's a very good question. It's another example of inorganic prophecy. That and the Jewish people. I gave an entire lecture on this issue. It's very interesting because they're juxtaposed to each other. In the Torah, the Jewish people sinning right after they got prophecy, and Bilam with his enormous sins, enormous egregious sins right after his prophecy. Very interesting. But Moses' prophecy is the middle of the day.
So is Abraham.
No, Abraham's prophecy is not the middle of the day.
When the strangers
Well,
come,
it's the middle of the day,
Isaac
but-
when he's sacrificing, it's all over.
Middle of the day means, when I say middle of the day, means that he's awake. Moses is awake and alert, as opposed to the middle of the night in a dream.
No, I'm saying Abraham was awake. And
Well,
3
Abraham,
days after his circumcision, I think
that's
he was
true.
pretty awake.
But when the prophecy, no, you bring up a good point. But when the prophecy actually descended upon Abraham, he is in the state of what we would call sleep or slumber.
No, he was at the exit of the tent, right? And we see the 3 people. He
And
thought-
then when the prophecy came, that's the rule of prophecy. You have to read Maimonides. He describes what happens
What
when
about
they get
when
prophecy.
at the altar when he's about to sacrifice his son? That's in the middle of the
Well,
day.
that's also remember what is that? That touched by angels, malachi. It's not clear if that's prophecy or that's some degree of prophecy. You're asking good questions. We'll look at Maimonides next time we meet. Right, that's what we look at Maimonides. He tells us the differences.
One of the 13 principles, he said, I believe with perfect faith that Moshe was the biggest one.
Yes.
So you have to believe with perfect faith, right? When he says these 13
Right. So
principles.
and what distinguishes Moses' prophecy? He brings us 4 different things. We said Moses is while he's awake and alert. Everyone else is in the middle of the night while they're in this subconscious state, so to speak. Moses is direct communication. Everyone else is in the form of imagery. So as opposed to Moshe is face-to-face, so to speak, direct communication. Everyone else gets scared and terrified and starts shaking, and Moses is perfectly calm and collected. And lastly is that everyone else has to wait for God to kind of come to them while Moses can go to God. Those are the 4 differences that distinguish Moses' prophecy from everyone else's prophecies, according to Maimonides, in I think it's the 8th chapter of Yesod HaTorah, of the foundations of the Torah, which is the very first laws that he discusses in his magnum opus, the Chazakah, the Mishnah Torah, in the Book of Micah. So we'll
have to look into
you gotta trust me for this. He's already looking at his phone. You got it? Did you check it up? Is it there? Oh, sorry. I thought you were verifying what I was
Posting
saying.
pictures on Facebook.
Sorry. Yes, go ahead, Lenny.
I would like to interject a few ideas
Go ahead.
about the structure of this discussion.
Yes.
What made me think about it was the discussion and a few comments you had about memorization of the
Yes.
And the preface to this discussion was that you were going to talk about Shema.
Yes.
And I would venture to say that a large majority of the attendees at this discussion tonight, do not have the many facets of the Shema prayer identified in their mind, or certainly memorized. And so I believe that if we were to discuss the many attributes and the meanings of the Shema prayer, that we should have had recited by, in some manner, the actual literal description of the many facets of the Shema prayer.
Or you're saying we should say the Shema?
And it would make the entire discussion much more meaningful and lasting. I sat here with my hearing difficulties and also with the difficulties of the fault I find with your presentation of waiting until you have something very important to say that's worthwhile memorizing, and then dropping your voice to the point where I couldn't hear it, and therefore missed out on a very high percentage of the meaning of what was being discussed. And so I believe that the recitation by the leader of the discussion of the actual prayer would make it all more meaningful.
That's a very good idea. And I know you mentioned before that sometimes I lower my voice. I think apparently it was a tactic that they taught us in public speaking, that you're supposed to have like the pitch, and you're supposed to go up and down, and then you're here, and then you're up here and you're outside, and then you talk over here. So, but I know it can be very frustrating, and I apologize.
Wow.
And I have zero intention of disincluding anyone from the discussion. And yeah, and I did mention that I did want to bring an actual printout of the Shema, and I think that would have enhanced the discussion greatly. I think that I'm actually going to follow Bonnie's advice and do a part 2, because we didn't really get that far in the Shema, and I think that's a very good idea to do that. Maybe we'll say the Shema together. It's a very, very powerful idea. And my hopes are that it's if we know why we're saying the Shema, and we know the meaning behind the Shema, and we know the power of the Shema, and we understand the impact that it can have on our lives in the Shema, that it won't just be us reciting it once here, in the context of a class, but it's something that we use throughout our lives, whenever, hopefully every day. We're told to say it in the morning and at night. We're clearly, the Torah is almost hyperbolic about it, that the importance of the reciting of the Shema. So I do think that's a good point to make. And you know what? I think it's. I think I mentioned this in a previous discussion. Am I talking loudly enough? Sorry. But I did mention that, when you have these really nice discussions, they could be impactful if you integrate them into your lives, and they could be very interesting, but not so lasting if you don't integrate them into your lives. And I think the Shema is a great example of that, wherein if we listen and heed, so to speak, we listen to what we're talking about, we can actually utilize it as a springboard for becoming better people, better Jews, people that are more closely linked to the great missions, the great teachings of the Jewish people, and as presented in the Shema.
I know that there are many facets of the science and technology of public speaking which involve the control of the tempo, the pitch, and the volume of the thoughts. But there's stage whisper, wherein the actor is trained to effect the effect of a whisper, but yet with enough volume so that every single person in the audience can understand what he's saying.
Maybe I should do more research about that.
Maybe.
And I really apologize. I assure you it's not my intention. Okay, so where were we? Oh, how did Moshe not eat? That's what we're talking about. So Moshe is this great prophet, and he is Moshe is a transcendental prophet, and the reason behind that is that Moshe is the one who, more than any one of his peers, the prophets, he is able to isolate his soul, so to speak, and minimize the effect of his body. And in fact, we're told that Moses' face was as bright as the sun. I might have gone through this exercise with you guys once before. Moses' face is bright as the sun, and we find that the soul, if you were able to look at it, it would look like the sun. So my theory is that just like if you were to isolate the soul does not need any food, Moses is at the level in this body-soul paradigm that it's as if the soul is dominant and the body is just there, and the body doesn't need to be tended to in any way. Perhaps that's why Moses does not need to eat nor drink, because at this point of prophecy that he's having here with God, he is totally soulful, and therefore the body is just dragged along with the soul and does not need to be tended to. And, that's my thoughts on that. So either way, I want to share with you guys something that Maimonides writes about the Shema. Maimonides writes that this is in the book of Guide to the Perplexed. We know Maimonides wrote a lot of great and wonderful books. He wrote a book called Guide to the Perplexed, which is essentially Judaism in the lens of Greek philosophy. So the prevailing philosophy of the time is Greek philosophy, and was seen by many to be at odds with the Torah. And Maimonides does the work of writing a book that shows Judaism in the light of, or how would someone who is enveloped by Greek philosophy, how would they understand and rationalize the Torah? In it, he writes, he says, when you study the Shema, you spend many, many years on the first 6 words of the Shema. So I kind of get the feeling here, we've been talking about the Shema, the first words of the Shema for about maybe an hour. And maybe we feel like, okay, we got the message, let's move on to the next verse. And then Maimonides says we have to spend many years studying the first 6 words of the Shema. What's there to study? Right? Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one, Fartig, as they say in Yiddish. Move on. What else is there? What is this many years of contemplation that we need to do on the Shema? If we understand the first words of the Shema, the first 6 words of the Shema as being essentially the first 2 of the Ten Commandments, thus by extension, the entire Torah put together, well then maybe if we're essentially going through the entire Torah, well then it makes a lot of sense that there's room for many years of contemplation and deliberation. Perhaps, I think that's a very fair argument, no?
Well, if that's the argument, you would say your entire life. You would spend the first sentence.
Maybe.
A few years.
Okay. Maybe.
Right, then you'd never stop learning, right? If you would understand the entire Torah condensed in a sentence, you would spend your whole life studying that sentence.
Okay, so maybe there's something else here. So, want to share with you guys just an insight. This is a nice takeaway insight because, like, we haven't done the entire Shema, but we did talk about the first 6 words. And when we're saying this, we're making a declaration, but we're also standing testimony. And we're saying that I am getting up here. I hope, right? I tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God. And I'm saying that I believe that God is that Hashem is our God, and Hashem is one. Right? You're declaring that. We cover our eyes to concentrate. What are we doing? What is the nature of this declaration? Is it a belief box that we check? It's something that we believe? Is it something that we actually live? Is it something that we feel? Is it really something that resonates within us? What would we look like if we really believed it and it really impacted us? How would we be if we really believed, if we had no doubt, if we lived by this principle? It wasn't just some sort of ideology, some idea that, yeah, of course I believe. I'm not one of those atheists. I believe, yeah, of course. Well, this is the heartland of America. This is the Bible Belt. Of course we believe. Right? Is that really what the Shema is about? Is it about creating this option? Do you believe? Do you not believe? Which one? Okay, I believe. Excellent. Move on. Or is it really taking God and making him a master over you? Making him your king? Submitting yourself to God. If God is really there, if it's really true, right? If God is really Hashem is really our God, if that is true, then everything that we do in our lives is dependent, contingent on God. Everything, we have to totally submit ourselves to him. Well, that's an entirely different story. It means my hands, my feet, my mind, my abilities, my qualities, my gifts, my resources, my life itself. Well, then it all is submitted to God.
My calculus.
Everything. If that was really true. Now, that's an entirely different Shema. It's not just about a belief that we have. It's a transformation in who we are. It is a testimony that we are declaring, and we're declaring it on ourselves. I am someone. Hear Israel. We're the Jewish people. We believe that God is really there. Now, that implies things that we're going to be very uncomfortable with.
There's a song that we believe.
That's right. But I believe, right? What does that imply? It implies things that we're not going to be happy with. Right? We're going to feel constricted. Because if I really believe that, and I'm really dedicated to that, my self-worth, or not self-worth, but my importance is kind of downplayed a little bit. I am nothing more than someone who is dedicated towards this goal. And that is something that we're going to be hesitant to do.
Shema has some, like, the meaning of his, like, is hear, listen, and do, or something, like, all made into that.
Well, there's a lot of different meanings. We spend many years in this.
That's, yes, like I said, it's more than just, hear as a rule, as I want. There's like that too. There's listen, and not to hear, you listen first, and listen, hear, and then do.
Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example of what you're saying. In the book of Genesis, we find a meeting between a father and a son. And a meeting that was highly anticipated by both the father and the son. Why? Because the son was plucked away from his father at a very tender young age of 17. And until the child was 39, he did not meet his dad. His dad did not meet him. And obviously we're talking about Joseph and Jacob. So Jacob really loves Joseph, and he gives him the special clothing, and everything's wonderful. Joseph is kidnapped, you know the whole story. 22 years later, Joseph is the king in Egypt. All the events that transpired, of course, and then Jacob and Joseph meet. So there's a nuance in the verse that says that Joseph is crying when they met. Obviously very emotional, Joseph is crying. And the Midrash says something very peculiar. What does it say? It says that Jacob wasn't crying. Why was Jacob not crying? Jacob was someone who was so devastated by the loss of his, or the perceived loss of his child, that he said, I'm going to die, I'm going to go to hell. That's what he says, really. He says, I'd say I'm over, I'm going to hell. That's what he says. And then he was so devastated, and no one could make him happy, and he was just miserable for 22 years. He finally gets to meet his child. You would think this is the most momentous, emotional event of his life. Joseph is crying, and Jacob's not crying. So it says, why is Jacob not crying? So it says that Jacob was saying the Shema. Jacob is saying the Shema. And the question is, okay, Jacob's saying the Shema. Joseph is not saying the Shema. Why is Jacob saying the Shema, not Joseph? If they're supposed to say Shema, they're both saying the Shema. If it's not supposed to say Shema, then neither of them should be saying Shema. Why is Jacob saying the Shema, not Joseph? So, we know that there's a special status of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Right? We know that Moses says to God, why do we say the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, and not the God of Moses? Or the God of Joseph. Exactly. And there's something really special about the relationship that the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had with God that no one else replicated. And the way it's described in the Talmud is that the Avos, the forefathers, they are their Markavta de Shechina. They are the chariot of God. And what does that mean? You know that the president has the big Cadillac, always ready to go. And there's the Marine one, and there's Air Force One, and it's always fueled and ready to go at a moment's notice. Similarly, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were always primed and ready for having God in their lives. Right then. Always aware. Never for a second lost sight of that fact. And that's why it's the God of Abraham, because it's as if Abraham himself was a testament to God. Because he was always in a state of absolute readiness. Isaac and Jacob. Jacob is about to meet his child. He's about to meet the child that he's missed for so long. He's been so devastated without. He's, essentially it's the transformative event of his life, where everything that he thought he had lost, he realizes that he still has. He recognizes that during this event, this reunion, he's going to be overwhelmed with emotions, quite naturally. He gets overwhelmed with emotions. What is he going to forget about? What is he going to lose sight of for even a second? God. And therefore, he's going to lose sight of the God of Jacob. Suddenly he's not the God of Jacob. Jacob is involved with anything with something else. In order to prevent that from happening, at the point of this meeting, he says the Shema. To reinforce this total presence and total readiness of God, of being this chariot for God, and being ready to go, not to be overwhelmed by this interaction and make him forget about God. So I think that for us, if we take this idea, this insight of just the first 6 words of the Shema, and we already have something scheduled for next week to move on to. Apparently, those are 6 words. There's still 242 left. But the Shema is when someone accepts upon themselves, the way it's described, accept upon themselves the burden, the yoke of God. Now, why is it a burden? Because it's uncomfortable. Why is it a yoke? Because it's not pleasant. Why is it something that we have to kind of bear, we have to shoulder? Because it inhibits us. When we actually have kind of God, the presence of God on us, right? It's an uncomfortable situation to be in. And that's why it's not easy to say the Shema and really mean it. Because by saying the Shema, I'm saying, God, well what does that mean about, if God is really there, well then what does it mean about me? What's my significance? I'm insignificant. That's not something that's easy to do. Right? That exercise is something that you have to really contemplate for years and years. Yes, the insight of what we're saying in these such words is not so dramatic, but the implications and what it actually does, what it means for who I am as a human, that's something that's an entire reframing of who I am as a human. And that's
Rabbi, when was the presence of women acknowledged?
Well, that's a good question. We spoke about Abraham, right? Abraham, God tells him that his wife Sarah was a greater prophetess than him. So when we say Abraham, we mean Abraham and Sarah are indivisible unit, of course. Other examples of where God tells Sarah says, "Go kick Ishmael out," and Abraham says,
Listen to your wife.
Abraham says, "What? I mean, I'm kicking my own son out of my house." So God tells him, "Yes, whatever Sarah says to you, you listen to." So when we talk about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob as well, we are not disincluding their wives, of course not.
Sarah's prophecy happened during the day too.
Well, during the day when I
She
made
was
it
wide
that.
awake.
How do you know she's wide awake?
Because why are you laughing? God said, "Why are you laughing?" When she said she couldn't have kids.
Well, who says she was awake? How do we know what the status of her body was at that time?
Sorry.
We'll look at the sources.
Okay.
We have something to do there. You're trying to it's like you're picking on me as if it's me. I'm
not picking.
As if
We were just talking about Sarah, so it reminded me of it. That's all.
yeah. So we'll look at the sources.
Okay.
But yes, most certainly the great the
Sarah was about 90 years old when she had the baby, right?
pretty remarkable, huh? There was this woman in Israel who just had a baby at 65. So I'm joking. It's a story. It's this past year.
I read it.
65 years old.
First child.
Her first child.
First pregnancy, first child.
Can you imagine?
Only
65. It's insane. Yeah. Either way.
I was tired of chasing around at 35.
Either way, I think for us, what's our takeaway from this week? It's going to be that the Shema is a lot. There's a lot there. It's something we're familiar with. It's a prayer that we've seen before. Maybe we know it. Maybe we don't. Either way, it is crucial. It is essential. It is pivotal. It is fundamental. It is what describes who we are as a nation. But it's also not easy. And if we are to follow the instructions of Maimonides, we're told that there's years and years and years of work to actually maximize what it means. Why? Because it's not comfortable. It's putting us in a situation, in a scenario where we're submitting ourselves entirely to God. And what that actually means, we see the very next verse talks about martyrdom. What does martyrdom have to do with belief in God? Well, a natural extension of complete faith is giving up everything for God, even your life. Obviously, that is dramatically ahead of what we're used to thinking and feeling when we say the Shema. So there's a gap between understanding what we're talking about and actually integrating it into our life, and that's where we have years and years and years to work on it. But God willing, next week we will continue the Shema and see what else it has in store for us. I thank you all, and thank you again, Dana, for inviting us into your lovely home. And thank you everyone for coming. And I look forward to seeing you all next week to continue this wonderful subject.
So Friday we'll have Kabbalat Shabbat, Coast Crossing, right?